The Zorchian warship's plasma cannons shattered the fragile peace of the Talaxian sector, raining fire upon the helpless Talaxian refugee colony below. Huddled in underground bunkers, the Talaxians prayed for a miracle as the ruthless Zorchians bombarded their new home, the planet Zephyrus. Talaxian leader Xenos watched in despair as the terraforming equipment his people had spent years building burst into flames under the onslaught. The Talaxians had fled persecution from the tyrannical Zorchian Empire, seeking to rebuild on this uninhabited world, only to be discovered at the worst possible time. James Wilson, heading a human trade delegation to establish new commercial routes in the sector, intercepted frantic distress calls from the Talaxian colony. The seasoned diplomat and ex-military officer immediately recognized the injustice and the threat the Zorchian Empire posed to other peaceful civilizations. Outraged, James contacted Earth for authorization to intervene. Earth's leadership saw the danger and gave James the green light. He reached out to Xenos, offering humanity's protection and support. The wary Talaxian leader, desperate for any help, agreed to meet. James was struck by the Talaxians' advanced terraforming tech and peaceful ways, seeing the potential for an alliance benefiting both civilizations. News of the Zorchian aggression spread, sending tremors of fear through the sector's other races who knew they could be next. James rallied them to form a coalition against the Zorchians' might. Many hesitated, but his impassioned call for unity and defense of the innocent swayed them. With the Zorchian fleet approaching and time running out, James and Xenos readied Zephyrus's defenses, the fate of the sector hanging in the balance. As the Zorchian fleet approached Zephyrus, James Wilson and Xenos raced against time to bolster the planet's defenses. Wilson contacted Admiral Sarah Thompson, a battle-hardened human strategist renowned for her tactical brilliance. Thompson arrived with a squadron of state-of-the-art human warships, their sleek hulls overflowing with advanced weaponry. "Admiral Thompson, thank you for coming," Wilson said as they shook hands in the command center. "Your expertise will be invaluable in the coming battle." Thompson nodded curtly. "The Zorchians must be stopped. We'll make sure they regret setting foot in this sector." Emperor Krator, a ruthless Zorchian tyrant, had tasked his most feared commander, General Zaxxon, with crushing the Talaxian resistance. Zaxxon's fleet, an armada of heavily armed warships, entered the Talaxian sector with a single purpose: to make an example of those who dared defy Zorchian rule. Wilson and Thompson attempted to open diplomatic channels with the Zorchians, hoping to avoid bloodshed. They broadcast a message on all frequencies, urging Zaxxon to abandon his aggressive campaign and seek a peaceful resolution. But their pleas were met with ominous silence. It became clear that Zaxxon had no intention of negotiating. Tensions escalated when a Zorchian warship, commanded by the ruthless Captain Dracos, clashed with a human patrol near Zephyrus. The patrol, led by the skilled Lieutenant Commander Michael Chen, managed to disable the Zorchian vessel and capture Dracos and his crew. Interrogating the prisoners, Chen uncovered crucial intelligence about the composition and battle plans of Zaxxon's fleet. Armed with this vital information, Wilson, Thompson, and Xenos crafted a multi-layered defense strategy that played to the strengths of each coalition race. The Talaxians adapted their advanced terraforming technology to create sophisticated sensor networks and treacherous environmental hazards for the invaders. The humans contributed cutting-edge weapons and tactical expertise honed in countless battles. The insectoid cliques, known for their lightning-fast strike craft, prepared to harass the Zorchian fleet and disrupt their formations. The aquatic Nereians, masters of underwater combat, readied their submarine forces to launch devastating attacks from beneath the waves. As the Allied forces worked tirelessly to fortify Zephyrus, a sense of unity and dedication spread among them. Wilson gathered the coalition leaders and delivered a rousing speech. "We stand together today not just for the Talaxians, but for the right of all sentient beings to live free from tyranny," he declared, his voice resonating with conviction. "The Zorchians believe they can crush us, but they underestimate the power of our unity. We will fight with everything we have, and we will prevail." Cheers erupted from the assembled warriors, their determination hardened by Wilson's words. They knew the battle ahead would be fierce, but they were ready to give their all to defend the innocent and preserve the freedom of the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the Zordian homeworld, a flicker of rebellion stirred in the heart of the Empire. Zara, the daughter of a high-ranking Zortian official, had grown disillusioned with her people's oppressive ways. In secret, she gathered like-minded individuals who shared her conviction that the Empire's path was wrong. They formed the nucleus of a resistance movement, determined to challenge the tyranny from within. As Zaxxon's fleet entered orbit around Zephyrus and the coalition forces steeled themselves for the impending assault, the fate of countless lives hung in the balance. The battle for Zephyrus was about to begin, a pivotal moment that would shape the future of the galaxy. The courage and drive of the defenders would be put to the ultimate test as they stood against the might of the Zortian war machine. The Zortian fleet descended upon Zephyrus like a swarm of locusts, their ships blotting out the stars. General Zaxxon's flagship led the charge, its massive cannons glowing with almost unchecked energy. "All units engage!" Admiral Sarah Thompson's voice crackled over the coalition comm channels. Human warships surged forward, their weapons blazing. Click strike craft darted between the larger vessels, their agility allowing them to evade Zortian fire. James Wilson watched from the command center as the space battle unfolded. Holographic displays showed the coalition forces holding their own, but the sheer number of Zortian ships was overwhelming. "We can't keep this up," Zeno said, his eyes fixed on the tactical readouts. "We need to fall back to the surface." Wilson nodded grimly. "Agreed. Admiral Thompson, initiate planetfall protocol." The coalition fleet began a fighting retreat, drawing the Zortians into the atmosphere of Zephyrus. As they descended, the unique terrain created by Talaxian terraforming came into view, a landscape of towering crystal formations and swirling mist. On the ground, Lieutenant Commander Michael Chen and his strike team moved swiftly through the crystalline forests. They had studied Captain Drakos's battle plans meticulously, anticipating the Zortians' every move. "Zortian dropships, 3 o'clock, Chen whispered into his comm. His team took up positions, their weapons trained on the incoming vessels. The dropships touched down, disgorging squads of Zortian soldiers. Chen waited until they were fully exposed, then gave the signal. Coalition forces erupted from their hiding spots, catching the Zortians in a devastating crossfire. As the ground battle raged, a Zortian infiltration unit slipped past the main defenses. They made their way towards the Talaxian capital, intent on destroying the terraforming equipment. Alarms blared throughout the command center. Xenos' face hardened as he realized the danger. "I'll handle this," he said, grabbing a high-tech Talaxian rifle. Wilson caught his arm. "You can't go alone. It's too dangerous." "My people need me," Xenos replied, his eyes blazing with tenacity. "I won't let the Zortians destroy everything we've built." Xenos led a team of Talaxian defenders to intercept the infiltrators. They engaged in a fierce firefight among the towering crystal structures, Talaxian energy weapons clashing with Zortian plasma rifles. In the heat of battle, Xenos' second-in-command, Zara, noticed a group of Zortians flanking their position. Without hesitation, she made her decision. "Sir, get our people out of here. I'll hold them off." "Zara, no!" Xenos began, but she was already moving, laying down suppressing fire. "Go!" she shouted, her voice filled with fierce loyalty. With a heavy heart, Xenos led the survivors to safety, Zara's covering fire fading behind them. In orbit, Admiral Thompson watched as the Zortian fleet pressed their advantage. She knew they needed a game-changer. "All ships, execute Operation Slingshot," she ordered. A portion of the human fleet broke away, appearing to retreat. As expected, a significant Zortian force pursued them, eager for an easy victory. Once the Zortians were sufficiently isolated, Thompson sprung her trap. The retreating ships suddenly reversed course, while another group of coalition vessels emerged from hiding behind Zephyrus's moons. Caught in the pincer maneuver, the Zortian ships found themselves under attack from multiple directions. Explosions blossomed in the void as coalition forces decimated the trapped enemy vessels. On the Zordian homeworld, Zara, daughter of the high-ranking official Crestor, watched leaked footage of the attack on Zephyrus. Her heart raced as she saw the destruction wrought by her own people. "This has to stop," she murmured, turning to her gathered allies. We need to act now. One of her compatriots spoke up. Your father contacted us. He's willing to help. Zara's eyes widened in surprise. My father? But he's always been loyal to the Empire. He says he's seen enough. He wants to make things right. A flicker of hope ignited in Zara's chest. With her father's inside information, they might have a chance to turn the tide from within the Empire itself. Back on Zephyrus, James Wilson received an urgent communication. Sir, reinforcements from Earth and our allies are on their way, but they won't arrive for another 6 hours. Wilson's heart sank as he looked at the tactical display. The Zortians were massing for a final assault on the Talaxian capital. They didn't have 6 hours. He turned to Xenos and Admiral Thompson, their faces grim in the glow of the holographic displays. We have a decision to make, Wilson said, his voice heavy with the weight of countless lives. Do we stand and fight, or do we evacuate? The three leaders exchanged looks, each understanding the monumental consequences of their choice. As they deliberated, the Zortian fleet loomed ever closer, ready to unleash their full fury on the defenders of Zephyrus. Wilson's eyes sharp as he surveyed the holographic display. The Zortian fleet loomed ever closer, their weapons primed for a final devastating assault on the Talaxian capital. We can't hold them off indefinitely, Admiral Thompson said, her voice tight with tension. If we stay, we risk losing everything. Xenos nodded gravely. My people's lives are more important than this planet. We must evacuate. Wilson took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Agreed. Begin the evacuation immediately. Every second counts. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as the evacuation order went out. Coalition forces established a defensive perimeter around designated evacuation sites, their weapons trained on the skies. As the first transports began lifting off, the Zortian fleet unleashed a relentless orbital bombardment. The ground shook and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning ozone. Energy shields flickered and strained under the assault. Lieutenant Commander Michael Chen's voice crackled over the comm. Wilson, this is Chen. We can buy you more time. My team can disable the Zortian command ship's weapon systems. Wilson hesitated, knowing the danger of such a mission. It's a long shot, Chen. It's our only shot, Chen replied, grit evident in his voice. Do it, Wilson ordered, praying he wasn't sending Chen and his team to their deaths. Chen's strike team boarded a stealth shuttle, weaving through the chaos of battle towards the imposing Zortian command ship. They breached the hull using shaped charges, fighting their way through corridors filled with startled Zortian crew members. Alex, cover our six, Chen shouted as they approached the weapons control room. His second-in-command, Alex Rodriguez, nodded and took up a defensive position. The team fought fiercely, their disruptors cutting through Zortian defenses. They reached the control room, quickly overpowering the operators inside. Chen's hands flew over the alien controls, planting the virus that would disable the ship's main weapons. Virus uploaded, Chen reported. Let's move. As they retreated, a Zortian security team ambushed them. In the ensuing firefight, Alex took a plasma bolt to the chest. Alex, Chen cried out, rushing to his friend's side. But it was too late. Alex's eyes were already growing dim. Go, Alex whispered, pressing his lucky charm into Chen's hand. Complete the mission. With a heavy heart, Chen led the remnants of his team back to their shuttle, leaving Alex's body behind. On the surface, the disabling of the Zortian command ship's weapons provided a crucial respite. Talaxian civilians streamed onto waiting transports, carrying what little they could salvage of their lives. Admiral Thompson's voice cut through the chaos. All fighters, form up on me. We're hitting their supply lines. A squadron of coalition fighters, led by Jake Maverick Harris, streaked through the atmosphere. They weaved through the Zortian fleet, targeting fuel tankers and munitions ships with surgical precision. Bullseye! Maverick whooped as another Zortian ship erupted in flames. That'll slow them down! As the last civilians boarded the transports, Xenos turned to Wilson. My warriors and I will cover the retreat. Get our people to safety. Wilson clasped Xenos' arm. We'll come back for Zephyrus, I promise you that. Xenos nodded, his eyes filled with dedication. He watched as the coalition ships lifted off, carrying the hopes and dreams of his people to the stars. With the evacuations complete, Wilson gave the order to withdraw, but not before launching a final devastating strike on the Zortian ground forces. The coalition ships unleashed their remaining ordnance, leaving the Zortian army in disarray. As they jumped to lightspeed, Wilson stared out at the receding image of Zephyrus. The battle was lost, but the war was just the beginning. He turned to Admiral Thompson, his eyes blazing with purpose. "Set course for Allied Base Gamma," he ordered. "We need to regroup and plan our next move." Thompson nodded, already formulating strategies in her mind. The Zortians may have won this round, but they've made a grave mistake. They've united the sector against them. As the coalition fleet sped towards safety, carrying the remnants of Talaxian civilization, Wilson knew that the true test still lay ahead. Retaking Zephyrus would be a monumental task, but it was one they had to undertake. The fate of the stars depended on it. The coalition fleet emerged from lightspeed, the verdant world of Arcadia filling their view screens. As they descended through the atmosphere, James Wilson gazed out at the sprawling military base below, its gleaming structures a stark contrast to the devastation they'd left behind on Zephyrus. The command staff gathered in a high-security briefing room, holograms flickering to life around them. Admiral Sarah Thompson's fingers danced across a control panel, bringing up tactical displays of their recent defeat. "We lost Zephyrus, but we saved its people," Wilson said, his eyes meeting Xenos's. The Talaxian leader nodded, a mix of gratitude and grit etched on his face. "Our priority now is to find a new home for the Talaxians," Xenos stated, pulling up data on potential worlds. "We've identified several candidates that might be suitable for terraforming." As they discussed relocation plans, an urgent message flashed across the main screen. Wilson's brow furrowed as he read the encrypted transmission from their intelligence network. "We have a situation," he announced, silencing the room. "Our allies on the Zortian homeworld have uncovered plans for a planet-destroying weapon." Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Admiral Thompson leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "If the Zortians deploy that weapon, we're finished." Wilson nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to take drastic action." He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "I propose we infiltrate the royal palace on Zortia Prime and capture Emperor Krator himself." Silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft hum of machinery. Then voices erupted in a cacophony of objections and support. "It's suicide. We don't have a choice. How would we even get close to the Emperor?" Wilson raised his hand, quieting the din. "I know it's risky, but it may be our only chance to end this war decisively." Admiral Thompson stood, her posture rigid with drive. "I'll assemble our best operatives for this mission. Lieutenant Commander Chen has proven himself in combat. He'll lead the strike team." As the meeting adjourned, Wilson caught up with Xenos in the corridor. "I'm sorry we can't focus all our resources on finding your people a new home," he said softly. Xenos placed a hand on Wilson's shoulder. "We understand the stakes, old friend. The Talaxians will do whatever it takes to support this mission." Meanwhile, on Zortia Prime, Zara moved silently through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. She emerged in a dimly lit safe house where her father, Crestor, waited with a group of resistance fighters. "The information you provided checks out," Zara said, embracing her father. "We've confirmed the existence of the weapon facility." Crestor's face was grim. "Then we must act quickly. The Empire cannot be allowed to wield such power." A commotion at the door drew their attention. Two resistance fighters entered, supporting a battered but defiant figure between them. "General Sorak," Crestor breathed, recognizing the newcomer. Sorak straightened, wincing slightly. "The Empire's cruelty has gone too far. I offer my skills to your cause, if you'll have me." Zara stepped forward, clasping the general's arm. "Your expertise could turn the tide of this fight. Welcome to the Resistance, General." As days passed, both sides prepared for the coming confrontation. On Arcadia, Chen's strike team underwent rigorous training, studying holograms of the palace layout and practicing breach maneuvers. Chen stood before his team, his face etched with persistence. "We have one shot at this. We get in, we grab the Emperor, and we get out. Failure is not an option. On Zorya Prime, Zara and Sorak pored over stolen blueprints, planning their diversionary attack. If we strike here and here, Sorak pointed, we can draw away enough guards to give the human team a fighting chance. The day of reckoning arrived. Chen's team, disguised as Zortian workers, slipped into the palace through service tunnels. They moved swiftly and silently, neutralizing guards with practiced efficiency. As they approached the Emperor's chambers, alarms blared throughout the complex. "Looks like our diversion worked," Chen muttered, signaling his team to move faster. They breached the ornate doors, finding Emperor Crater surrounded by his personal guard. A fierce firefight erupted, energy weapons scorching the opulent walls. Chen's team fought their way forward, their human reflexes giving them an edge over the surprised Zortians. With a well-placed shot, Chen stunned the Emperor, and two of his operatives moved to secure their prize. "We've got him," Chen reported into his comm, initiating extraction. But their path to freedom was far from clear. General Zaxxon's booming voice echoed through the corridors, rallying his troops to rescue their emperor. Chen's team found themselves in a desperate running battle, carrying the unconscious Crater as they fought their way toward their extraction point. Plasma bolts sizzled past their heads, the air thick with ozone and the shouts of pursuing soldiers. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, explosions rocked the palace. Through the smoke and chaos, Chen saw figures in resistance uniforms charging the Zortian lines. Zara appeared at his side, her face streaked with soot. "This way!" she shouted, leading them down a hidden passage. They emerged into a courtyard where a stealth shuttle waited, its engines humming with impatience. As Chen's team boarded with their royal captive, Zara turned back to the battle. "Aren't you coming?" Chen called out. Zara shook her head. "My place is here with my people. Go, end this war." The shuttle lifted off, streaking into the night sky as the sounds of battle faded behind them. Chen looked down at the unconscious form of Emperor Crater, hardly daring to believe they'd succeeded. As they broke atmosphere, heading for their rendezvous with the Coalition fleet, Chen allowed himself a small smile. They'd struck a blow that could change the course of the war, but he knew the real challenges were only just beginning. The Coalition fleet emerged from Lightspeed, the verdant world of Arcadia filling their view screens. As they descended through the atmosphere, James Wilson gazed out at the sprawling military base below, its gleaming structures a stark contrast to the devastation they'd left behind on Zephyrus. In the high-security detention block, Emperor Crater sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the energy field containing him. Wilson watched the monarch through a one-way mirror, trying to reconcile this diminished figure with the tyrant who had unleashed such destruction across the galaxy. "He hasn't said a word since we brought him in," Admiral Thompson reported, her voice low. "Our interrogators are at a loss." Wilson nodded grimly. "Keep trying. We need to know everything about that planet-killer weapon." Over the following weeks, a tense quiet settled over Coalition space. The Zortian invasion had collapsed with Crater's capture, but Wilson knew better than to relax his guard. He threw himself into the work of rebuilding, coordinating relief efforts, and bolstering planetary defenses. On the bridge of the flagship, Xenos pored over star charts, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This system shows promise," he murmured, zooming in on a cluster of uninhabited worlds. "We'll send survey teams to assess their viability." Wilson clasped his friend's shoulder. "We'll find your people a new home, Xenos. I swear it." Meanwhile, light years away on Zorya Prime, Zara stood before a fractious assembly of resistance leaders and former Imperial officials. The ornate chamber, once a symbol of Crater's oppressive rule, now crackled with the energy of competing visions for the future. "Order!" Zara's voice cut through the din. "We cannot afford to be divided. Our people need stability, not more conflict." General Sorak, his uniform crisp despite the chaos around him, stepped forward. "I propose we establish a constitutional monarchy, with Zara as our ceremonial head of state. It would provide continuity while allowing for real reform." Before Zara could respond, a harsh voice rang out from the back of the chamber. "Unacceptable!" The crowd parted to reveal Vorak, his eyes blazing with zeal. "The Empire must be dismantled entirely. Anything less is an insult to those who suffered under Krator's boot. The assembly erupted into shouts and recriminations. Zara raised her hand, silencing the room. We will take all proposals under advisement. For now, our priority must be maintaining order and preventing further bloodshed. As she spoke, a lieutenant hurried to her side, whispering urgently in her ear. Zara's expression hardened. We have reports of rogue Zortian commanders refusing to stand down, she announced. Led by Admiral Rexus, they've established a base on Varaxis and are launching attacks on Coalition supply lines. Sorak's eyes narrowed. Rexus was always a hardliner. He won't give up easily. Back on Arcadia, Wilson received the news with grim resignation. He convened an emergency meeting of Coalition leaders, their faces grave as they appeared on the war room's holoprojectors. We must act decisively, Wilson declared. I propose we issue an ultimatum, surrender unconditionally, or face the full might of our combined forces. The Coalition leaders nodded in agreement. Within hours, the message was transmitted across subspace, its stark terms leaving no room for negotiation. On Varaxis, Admiral Rexus sneered as he read the ultimatum. He turned to his assembled officers, his voice dripping with contempt. They think they can intimidate us? We are the true heirs of the Zortian Empire. We will never surrender. As Rexus's defiant response reached Arcadia, Wilson knew the time for diplomacy had passed. He turned to Admiral Thompson, his fists tight. Prepare our strike force. It's time to end this once and for all. In a secure briefing room, Michael Chen stood before a holographic display of Varaxis, memorizing every detail of the planet's defenses. He looked up as Wilson entered, flanked by Thompson and two unexpected figures, Zara and Sorak. Lieutenant Commander, Wilson said, you've been selected to lead this mission. Your objective, capture Rexus and neutralize his ability to wage war. Chen nodded, his eyes flickering to the Zortians. And our guess? We're here to help, Zara said firmly. Rexus poses as much of a threat to our vision of a reformed Zortia as he does to the Coalition. As the briefing continued, Chen's mind raced with the complexities of the operation ahead. The fate of two civilizations would rest on the success of their mission. He pushed the weight of that responsibility aside, focusing on the tactical challenges that lay before them. In the days that followed, Chen's multinational strike force underwent grueling training exercises. Human, Talaxian, and Zortian operatives learned to work as a seamless unit, their diverse skills complementing each other in ways that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. As the strike force made final preparations, Wilson stood on the observation deck, watching ships assembling in high orbit. The Coalition fleet was an awe-inspiring sight, but he knew that the coming battle would be won or lost by the actions of a handful of individuals on the ground. He turned to Admiral Thompson, his voice low but filled with purpose. Send the order. It's time to finish this war. The dust settled on Varaxis as Chen's strike force secured the last pockets of resistance. Admiral Rexus, once defiant, now sat subdued in the brig of a Coalition cruiser. As Chen transmitted the mission success code, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. The war that had consumed years of his life was finally, truly over. Months passed. The galaxy exhaled, adjusting to an uneasy peace. On Zortia Prime, Zara stood before a sea of faces in the newly christened Hall of Reconciliation. Her voice carried across the assembly, firm yet compassionate. Today we take a historic step. The system containing Razilire will be ceded to our Talaxian allies, with our full support for its development. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sorak, standing at attention nearby, gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval, but at the fringes of the hall, Vorak's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching at his sides. Light years away on Arcadia, James Wilson watched the broadcast, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He turned to Admiral Thompson, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. It's a start, he said softly. Thompson nodded, her expression guarded. We're establishing the garrison on Razilire as we speak. Chen's been tapped to lead the human contingent. Wilson's eyebrows rose. Chen? Interesting choice. He's earned it, Thompson replied. and we need someone who can navigate the complexities of this new reality. On Rezalir, a planet slowly transforming from barren rock to verdant potential, Chen stepped off the shuttle. The air was thin but breathable, tinged with the scent of newly planted vegetation. Xenos waited to greet him, flanked by a cadre of Talaxian officials. "Welcome to our new home, Commander," Xenos said, clasping Chen's arm. "We have much work ahead of us." Chen nodded, taking in the sprawling construction sites and fledgling settlements. "I'm here to help however I can." As Chen began to acquaint himself with his new post, he found an unexpected ally in Zalara, a young Talaxian warrior whose quick mind and fierce perseverance impressed him immediately. During a training exercise, Zalara effortlessly disarmed 2 human opponents, her movements fluid and precise. "Impressive," Chen said as she helped her sparring partners to their feet. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Zalara's expression darkened. "Necessity," she replied, her voice low. "When the Zortians came, we had to adapt or die." Chen nodded, recognizing the weight of unspoken trauma. "Tell me more about your experiences," he said gently. "It might help us better understand how to protect Rezalir." As the weeks passed, Chen and Zalara forged a bond built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Her insights into Talaxian culture and the refugee experience proved invaluable as Chen worked to integrate the disparate species under his command. Meanwhile, on Zortia Prime, Zara found herself walking a political tightrope. Each reform she proposed was met with pushback from hardliners like Vorak, who saw any concession to former enemies as weakness. "We should be punishing Imperial loyalists, not coddling them," Vorak shouted during a particularly heated council session. "Have you forgotten the atrocities committed in the name of the Empire?" Zara stood her ground, her voice level but steel-edged. "I forget nothing, Vorak, but we cannot build a just society on a foundation of vengeance." As she left the council chambers, Sorak fell into step beside her. "He's gaining support," the general warned. "We may need to take more decisive action." Zara stopped, turning to face him. "What exactly are you suggesting, Sorak?" Before he could answer, an aide hurried up, his face pale. "Your Highness, we've received an urgent transmission. Admiral Rajak has seized control of the Nexus outpost. He's declaring himself the true heir to the Empire." Zara's blood ran cold. The Nexus outpost housed some of the most destructive weapons in the former Imperial arsenal. In the wrong hands, it could reignite the war they'd fought so hard to end. On Arcadia, James Wilson received the news with grim resignation. He convened an emergency meeting of coalition leaders, their faces grave as they appeared on the war room's hollow projectors. "We must act swiftly and decisively," Wilson declared. "Every moment we hesitate gives Rajak time to consolidate his power." The coalition leaders nodded in agreement, but undercurrents of tension were palpable. Some questioned whether they could trust Zortian forces in this operation, given Rajak's imperial loyalties. Wilson turned to Admiral Thompson. "We need our best for this. Get Chen back here. He'll lead the strike force." As preparations for the assault on Nexus Outpost began, Chen found himself working alongside Sorak and his elite Zortian special forces. The coalition command insisted on their inclusion, citing their knowledge of Imperial defenses. But as Chen observed Sorak's team, a seed of doubt took root. Were these truly allies committed to peace, or opportunists waiting for the right moment to switch sides? The success of the mission, and perhaps the future of the fragile peace, would hinge on Chen's ability to navigate this uncertainty. The assault shuttles waited in the hangar, primed for launch. Chen addressed his mixed team of humans, Talaxians, and Zortians, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility. "Our objective is clear. Neutralize Rajak and secure the outpost. Trust your training, trust each other, and we'll get through this." As the hangar doors opened, revealing the star-studded void of space, Chen caught Sorak's eye. The Zortian general gave a curt nod, his expression unreadable. Chen took a deep breath, pushing aside his lingering doubts. It was time to move. The assault on Nexus Outpost unfolded with brutal efficiency. Chen's strike force breached the station's outer defenses, carving a path through waves of loyalist troops. Sorak's Zortian commandos proved their worth, their intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics allowing the coalition forces to outmaneuver Rajak's defenders at every turn. As Chen led the final push toward the command center, a stray plasma bolt seared past his helmet, leaving a scorched furrow in the bulkhead. He dove for cover, signaling Sorak to flank the entrenched position ahead. The Zortian general nodded, his face a mask of concentration as he directed his troops with practiced precision. The command center's blast doors buckled under sustained fire, revealing Admiral Rajak surrounded by a cadre of die-hard loyalists. Chen raised his weapon, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Surrender, Admiral! It's over!" Rajak's eyes blazed with defiance, but as he surveyed the fallen bodies of his men and the overwhelming force arrayed against him, his shoulders sagged. He dropped his sidearm, raising his hands in defeat. As coalition troops secured the outpost, Chen couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. The operation had gone almost too smoothly, as if Rajak had been caught off guard, despite the element of surprise being nearly impossible to maintain in such a high-profile assault. His suspicions crystallized into cold certainty when a junior intelligence officer approached, datapad in hand. "Sir, we've intercepted communications suggesting a leak in our command structure. It appears General Sorak may have passed mission details to Rajak prior to the assault." Chen's face hardened. He found Sorak overseeing the cataloging of captured weapons. The Zortian's back turned as Chen approached. "General Sorak, you're under arrest pending investigation for treason against the coalition." Sorak whirled, his eyes widening in shock. "This is absurd! I've given everything to this cause." "Then you'll submit to the investigation and clear your name," Chen replied, his voice level but brooking no argument. As coalition security personnel escorted Sorak away, Chen caught a glimpse of fury in the general's eyes. Whether at the accusation or at being caught, he couldn't be sure. Word of Sorak's arrest spread quickly. Within hours, Chen found himself face-to-face with a furious Zara, her normally composed features twisted with indignation. "You overstep your authority, Commander," she hissed. "General Sorak has been instrumental in our reforms. I vouch for his loyalty personally." Chen stood his ground. "With respect, Your Highness, the evidence is circumstantial at best," Zara interrupted. "You risk undoing months of delicate political maneuvering with this rash action." As tensions escalated between coalition and Zortian factions, an unexpected voice cut through the din. Xenos stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and drive. "My friends, my allies," the Talaxian began, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the arguing factions. "Have we already forgotten the price of our hard-won peace? My people fled across the stars, leaving behind everything we knew to escape persecution. We came to Resalir with a vision, not just of survival, but of a world where all species could coexist in harmony." Xenos turned to Chen, his gaze softening. "Commander, I understand your caution. The scars of war run deep, but we must not let suspicion poison the well of trust we've worked so hard to fill." Chen felt the weight of all eyes upon him. He took a deep breath, considering Xenos' words. "You're right," he said at last. "We can't afford to fracture our alliance over unproven allegations." He turned to Zara. "I'll release General Sorak, but I propose he be assigned duties separate from your government for the time being. A compromise to maintain stability while we investigate further." Zara nodded curtly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Acceptable. We will weather this storm together." As the immediate crisis passed, none present could have imagined the gathering storm on the fringes of known space. In the shadows of an abandoned mining colony, Admiral Zorath, brother to the deposed Emperor Crater, surveyed his growing fleet of mercenary warships. His eyes gleamed with fanatical intensity as he addressed his assembled captains. "The usurper Zara and her coalition lapdogs grow complacent," Zorath sneered. "They think the war is won, that the glory of the Zortian Empire can be so easily swept aside. We will show them the error of their ways." A chorus of cheers erupted from the assembled officers. Zorath raised a hand for silence. "Prepare your ships. Our first targets will be the coalition's shipyards and the supply lines feeding Resalir. We'll strangle their precious peace in its cradle." As Zorath's fleet surged from its hidden base, the first wave of attacks caught the coalition completely off guard. Mining outposts and orbital refineries erupted in flames, their defenses overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught. On Rezalir, Zilara watched in horror as reports flooded in of devastated supply convoys and shattered colonies. "We need help," she insisted, turning to Chen. "The coalition must intervene before Zorath's forces gain any more ground." Chen nodded grimly. "I'll contact High Command immediately. This is a threat we can't afford to ignore." But as pleas for aid reached coalition ears, they were met with skepticism and accusations. Hardliners pointed to Sorak's recent arrest as evidence of Zortian duplicity, suggesting Zara's loyalists might be colluding with the raiders to destabilize the region. On Arcadia, James Wilson pored over intelligence reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as Admiral Thompson entered his office, her expression grave. "It's worse than we thought," Thompson said without preamble. "Zorath's fleet is growing by the day. If we don't act soon, we risk losing everything we've fought for." Wilson nodded, his mind racing through potential strategies. "Agreed. We need to strike hard and fast before Zorath can consolidate his gains." He paused, considering. "Get me Chen. If anyone can pull off the kind of operation we need, it's him." As Wilson began outlining his audacious plan, light years away, Zorath's fleet prepared for its next devastating raid. The fragile peace hung in the balance, with the fate of multiple civilizations resting on the actions of a select few. The true test of the coalition's dedication and the strength of their newfound alliances was about to begin. The years that followed the Nexus Outpost incident saw a gradual shift on Rezalir. What began as a sanctuary for Talaxian refugees blossomed into a thriving metropolis of diverse species. Chen watched with pride as the planet transformed, its cities rising from bare earth to gleaming towers that pierced the clouds. On a crisp autumn morning, Chen stood before a mirror, adjusting the formal uniform he hadn't worn in years. Today marked a new chapter, not just for him, but for the future of human Talaxian relations. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The ceremony was a vibrant fusion of human and Talaxian traditions. Chen's heart swelled as Zilara walked down the aisle, her silver-blue skin adorned with intricate patterns of bioluminescence that pulsed in time with the music. They exchanged vows beneath an arch of iridescent flowers, their hands clasped as two cultures became one. Life settled into a rhythm of governance and growth. Chen found himself splitting time between his military duties and helping Zilara navigate the complexities of their expanding society. The birth of their twins, Kron and Tali, brought a joy Chen had never known possible. But peace, as always, proved fragile. The first signs of trouble came as whispers, reports of unrest in the outer colonies, of Zortian supremacist rhetoric gaining traction. Chen dismissed them at first, chalking it up to the growing pains of a new galactic order. It wasn't until an urgent communique from Zara herself that the true gravity of the situation became clear. "Grand Admiral Valdrin," Zara's holographic form explained, her face tight with worry. "He's gathering forces, Chen, loyalist slave armies. He means to undo everything we've built." Before Chen could formulate a response, alarms blared throughout the command center. Tactical displays lit up with incoming vessels, hundreds of them, bearing down on Rezalir with terrifying speed. "All hands to battle stations," Chen barked, years of training kicking in. "This is not a drill. Valdrin's armada is inbound." The sky above Rezalir erupted in chaos. Coalition ships scrambled to intercept, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Chen watched in horror as the first salvo of orbital bombardment struck home, reducing entire city blocks to rubble. "We need to take the fight to them," Zilara insisted, her eyes blazing with tenacity. "A surgical strike at their command ship." Chen nodded grimly. "Agreed. I'll lead the assault team myself." "Not without me," Zilara countered, already strapping on combat gear. They assembled a strike force, a mix of human special forces, Talaxian infiltrators, and the best Zortian loyalists. As their boarding craft rocketed towards Valdrin's massive flagship, Chen allowed himself a moment of trepidation. He squeezed Zalara's hand, drawing strength from her presence. The battle that followed was a maelstrom of chaos. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Chen's team fought their way deeper into the ship's labyrinthine corridors. They were close, so close, to breaching the command deck when disaster struck. A lucky shot from a Zortian defender caught Zalara in the chest. She crumpled, blue blood seeping between her fingers as Chen caught her. "Go!" she gasped, her eyes already dimming. "Finish this, for our children." Chen's world narrowed to a pinprick of grief and rage. He pressed on, leaving part of his soul behind with Zalara's body. The final confrontation with Valdrin was a blur of savage hand-to-hand combat. Chen emerged victorious, his opponent disarmed and at his mercy. "Do it!" Valdrin sneered, expecting execution. Chen's finger tightened on the trigger, every fiber of his being screaming for vengeance. But Zalara's face flashed in his mind, and he lowered the weapon. "No," Chen said, his voice hoarse. "That's not who we are. That's not the future we're fighting for." In the moment of hesitation, Valdrin slipped away, disappearing into the chaos of the disintegrating flagship. Chen barely registered the retreat, his mind already racing back to Rezalier, to the children who would never know their mother's touch again. The days that followed were a haze of grief and duty. Chen found himself thrust into the role of single father, balancing the needs of his traumatized twins with the monumental task of rebuilding a shattered world. Each night, he whispered promises to Zalara's memory, vowing to shape Crone and Tali into the beacons of hope their mother had dreamed they would become. Yet even as Rezalier began to heal, new threats loomed on the horizon. Reports trickled in of strange attacks on outlying colonies, precision strikes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. It wasn't until Chen reviewed footage of a recent raid that a chill ran down his spine. The tactics, the ship configurations, they bore the unmistakable stamp of Valdrin's cunning. Chen's comm unit chirped, a familiar voice filling the air. "Chen, it's James. We need to talk. I think we've got a serious problem on our hands." As Chen moved to answer, his gaze fell on a hollow image of Zalara, her smile forever frozen in time. Whatever storm was coming, he would face it. For her, for their children, for the future they had all sacrificed so much to build. Chen's fingers trembled as he closed the comm channel with James. The weight of years settled heavily on his shoulders as he gazed at Zalara's hollow image. He allowed himself a moment of grief before straightening, eyes sharp with willpower. "Dad?" Tali's voice pulled him from his reverie. His daughter stood in the doorway, her silver-blue skin a testament to her mixed heritage. At 25, she'd already proven herself a brilliant tactical mind. "What is it?" Chen asked, noting the tension in her posture. Tali's eyes flickered to the tactical displays. "Another attack, Outpost Sigma 9. The same precision strikes, same vanishing act." Chen nodded unsurprised. "Valdrin." "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be." Chen pulled up the footage, pointing out key details. "See here? The way they target life support systems first, then communications. Classic Valdrin." Tali's brow furrowed as she analyzed the data. "But why now? After all these years?" Before Chen could respond, alarms blared throughout the command center. Red warning lights bathed the room in an eerie glow as tactical officers scrambled to their stations. "Multiple contacts," shouted Lieutenant Rax. "Emerging from hyperspace. It's a full-scale invasion force." Chen's blood ran cold as the tactical display filled with hostile signatures. Hundreds of ships, their configurations unlike anything in known space, poured into the system. "By the void," Tali whispered. "This isn't Valdrin." "All defense stations, this is not a drill," Chen barked into the comm. "I want every ship we have in the air now. Civilian evacuation protocols are in effect." As chaos erupted around them, Chen caught sight of his son Crone sprinting into the command center. The young man's eyes blazed with a familiar fire. Zalara's fire. "The Vanguard is ready," Crone reported, his voice steady despite the pandemonium. "We'll hold the line as long as we can." Chen clasped his son's shoulder, a lifetime of unspoken emotions passing between them. "May the stars guide you, son." As Crone departed, Chen turned to find Tali already deep in tactical analysis. Her fingers flew across holographic interfaces, running simulations and probability matrices. "We're outgunned and outmaneuvered," she said, her voice clinical despite the dire circumstances. "But if we can funnel them through the Terrace Nebula, we might have a chance to—" Her words were cut short as the first impacts rocked the city. Through the command center's panoramic windows, Chen watched in horror as massive bioengineered monstrosities tore through Resilier's orbital defenses. Leviathans, he breathed, recognizing the nightmarish creatures from old intelligence reports. They've weaponized them. Tali's eyes widened in realization. Dad, if those things reach the surface... Chen nodded grimly. We need to evacuate, now. As they raced to implement emergency protocols, Chen's mind whirled. Who were these invaders? How had they amassed such a force without detection? And most pressingly, how could they possibly hope to survive? The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Chen coordinated with James and Zara, marshaling what coalition forces they could. But as reports flooded in of outer colonies falling, hope dwindled. It was Crone who proposed the high-stakes endeavor. The Last Vigil, he called it. A network of precisely calibrated wormholes seeded throughout the capital. When detonated, they would rip apart anything caught in the vortex, friend or foe. It's suicide, Chen protested, but the cold logic of it was undeniable. As the Leviathans descended on Talaxia, Chen found himself in the heart of the city. Civilians streamed past, terror etched on faces of a dozen species. He caught sight of Xenos, the aged Talaxian, leaning heavily on a cane as he helped usher refugees to safety. It was a good dream we had, Xenos said, his eyes meeting Chen's. Perhaps the next generation will see it fulfilled. Before Chen could respond, the sky ignited. The wormhole lattice detonated, reality itself seeming to tear apart. As the vortex consumed everything in its path, Chen's last thought was of Zalara. Then darkness claimed him. Tali stood aboard the command deck of the Defiant, staring at the smoldering ruin that had once been her home. Resilier, the dream her parents had fought so hard to build, lay in ashes. But from those ashes, a fire of dedication burned within her. Supreme Commander, her aide said softly, the last of the refugees are aboard. We await your orders. Tali took a deep breath, steeling herself for the long fight ahead. Set course for the Irenic Rift. It's time we showed these Vexurans what humanity is truly capable of. As the battered coalition fleet limped away from the devastation, Tali began formulating plans. They would rebuild, they would rally their allies, and one day they would reclaim their home from these invaders. The Defiant vanished into hyperspace, carrying with it the last desperate hope for victory against an implacable foe.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.